Stephen F. Austin was a visionary colonizer and diplomatic statesman who became known as the father of Texas. Stephen Fuller Austin, the impresario who brought American settlers to Mexican Texas, was born in Austinville, Virginia on November 3, 1793. He came from a family of entrepreneurs and pioneers. Austin had a dignified and measured demeanor. His father Moses Austin was a prominent businessman and land speculator who had made and lost fortunes in mining and banking. Stephen was educated at Bacon Academy in Connecticut and later at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, receiving a classical education that prepared him for leadership. After completing his studies, young Austin returned to Missouri where his family had relocated. He worked in his father's lead mining business and served in the territorial legislature. Austin showed early promise in both business and politics. He was appointed as a judge and proved himself capable in matters of law and governance. In 1820, Moses Austin traveled to San Antonio to request permission from Spanish authorities to establish an American colony in Texas. The elder Austin received approval but died in June 1821 before he could fulfill his dream. On his deathbed, Moses Austin asked his son Stephen to carry out the colonization plan. Stephen F. Austin was reluctant at first to take on this enormous responsibility. He had his own plans and ambitions in Missouri. But family duty and the promise of opportunity drew him to Texas. In August 1821, the 27-year-old Austin arrived in Texas to continue his father's work. He found a land of vast prairies, dense forests, and untamed rivers. Texas was a frontier region with few settlements and even fewer resources. Austin had to negotiate with both Spanish and then Mexican authorities as Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821. He traveled to Mexico City to confirm his father's grant and secure the legal framework for his colony. Austin spent nearly a year in the Mexican capital, learning Spanish, studying Mexican law, and building relationships with government officials. He proved to be a skilled diplomat and negotiator. Austin's contract allowed him to bring 300 families to settle in Texas. These settlers became known as the Old 300. Austin was meticulous in selecting colonists. He wanted farmers, craftsmen, and professionals who would build stable communities. He rejected troublemakers and those who might cause problems with Mexican authorities. Austin established his colonial capital at San Felipe de Austin on the Brazos River. From this headquarters, he managed the complex task of surveying land, assigning grants, and governing the growing colony. Austin served as impresario, judge, military commander, and father figure to his colonists. He resolved disputes, organized defenses against Indian raids, and maintained order with limited resources. The impresario system required Austin to provide land to settlers at minimal cost while he received compensation in land for each family he brought to Texas. Austin's responsibilities were enormous and the financial rewards were slow in coming. Life on the Texas frontier was harsh and dangerous. Settlers faced threats from Comanche and Karankawa raids, disease, isolation, and the challenges of breaking new ground. Austin worked tirelessly to protect and support his colonists. He organized ranging companies to patrol the territory and defend against Indian attacks. These ranging companies were precursors to the famous Texas Rangers. Austin understood that survival depended on cooperation and discipline. He established laws and regulations for his colony, creating a framework of governance that balanced American traditions with Mexican requirements. Austin was a slave owner, as were many of his colonists who came from the American South. Slavery was a contentious issue in Mexican Texas. Mexico had abolished slavery, but Austin negotiated exemptions and workarounds to allow his colonists to bring enslaved people to work their land. This issue would create ongoing tension between the American settlers and Mexican authorities. By the mid-1820s, Austin's colony was thriving. More settlers arrived, drawn by the promise of cheap, fertile land. Austin received additional contracts to bring more families to Texas. His success attracted other impresarios who established their own colonies. Austin became the most prominent American in Texas and the de facto leader of the Anglo-American community. He corresponded with Mexican officials, mediated conflicts, and advocated for the interests of the settlers. Austin believed in working within the Mexican system. He encouraged his colonists to become Mexican citizens, learn Spanish, and respect Mexican law. He saw Texas as part of Mexico and himself as a loyal Mexican citizen. Austin was not a revolutionary or a rebel. He was a pragmatic builder who wanted stability and prosperity for his colony. However, tensions between the American settlers and the Mexican government grew throughout the late 1820s and early 1830s. The settlers, mostly from the United States, brought American customs, language, and expectations. They chafed under Mexican laws they didn't understand and regulations they found burdensome. Mexico, meanwhile, grew concerned about the flood of American immigration. Mexican officials worried that Texas would be lost to American expansion. In 1830, Mexico passed laws restricting further American immigration and imposing new taxes and trade restrictions. Austin traveled again to Mexico City to negotiate relief for the colonists. He spent months petitioning officials and seeking compromises. Austin walked a difficult line, trying to satisfy both his colonists and the Mexican government. The political situation in Mexico was unstable. Presidents and constitutions changed frequently. In 1833, General Antonio López de Santa Anna came to power. Initially, Santa Anna presented himself as a Federalist who supported state rights. Austin and other Texans hoped he would be sympathetic to their concerns. Austin was sent to Mexico City as a representative of Texas to present petitions for greater autonomy, including separation from Coahuila and the creation of a separate state of Texas. Austin spent over a year in Mexico City negotiating with officials. He made some progress on certain issues but failed to achieve statehood for Texas. Frustrated by the lack of response, Austin wrote a letter to officials in San Antonio suggesting that Texas should organize its own state government even without Mexican approval. This letter was intercepted by authorities and Austin was arrested for sedition in January 1834. Austin spent nearly 2 years imprisoned in Mexico City. He was held in a dungeon cell for several months before being moved to better quarters. He was never formally tried but remained under arrest. During his imprisonment, Austin's health deteriorated and his faith in the Mexican government eroded. The experience transformed Austin from a loyal Mexican citizen into someone who questioned whether Texas could remain part of Mexico. While Austin was imprisoned, the political situation in Mexico and Texas continued to deteriorate. Santa Anna abandoned federalism and established a centralist dictatorship. He dissolved state legislatures and concentrated power in Mexico City. These actions alarmed not just Texans but Mexicans throughout the country who valued local autonomy and constitutional government. Austin was finally released in July 1835 and returned to Texas in September. He found the colony on the brink of war. Mexican troops had been sent to Texas to enforce centralist policies and disarm the colonists. Skirmishes had already occurred. Austin, the man who had spent 15 years building peaceful relations with Mexico, now found himself swept up in the movement toward revolution. In October 1835, fighting broke out between Texan settlers and Mexican forces at Gonzales. Austin was chosen to command the volunteer Texan army that marched on San Antonio. He was not a natural military leader. Austin was a diplomat and administrator, not a soldier. But he was respected and trusted by the colonists. Austin led the siege of San Antonio but struggled to maintain discipline among the independent-minded volunteers. The Texan forces were disorganized and lacked supplies and training. In November 1835, while the siege continued, Austin was selected to travel to the United States as a commissioner to seek support for the Texas cause. He left military command to others and embarked on a diplomatic mission. Austin traveled to cities including New Orleans, Louisville, Cincinnati, and Washington, giving speeches, writing letters, and meeting with officials and potential supporters. He sought money, volunteers, and political recognition for Texas. Austin was effective in this role, using his credibility and eloquence to generate sympathy and support for Texas independence. He raised funds and recruited volunteers who would travel to Texas to join the fight. Austin also sought to influence American public opinion and government policy regarding Texas. While Austin was in the United States, the Texas Revolution intensified. In December 1835, Texan forces captured San Antonio after a fierce battle. But in March 1836, Santa Anna led a Mexican army north to crush the rebellion. The Mexican forces besieged the Alamo Mission in San Antonio, where a small force of Texans had fortified themselves. After a 13-day siege, the Mexican army overran the Alamo, killing all the defenders, including famous frontiersmen James Bowie and Davy Crockett. Weeks later, Mexican forces executed hundreds of Texan prisoners at Goliad. These events shocked and enraged Texans and Americans. Meanwhile, on March 2, 1836, Texas delegates meeting at Washington on the Brazos declared independence from Mexico. They drafted a constitution and established the Republic of Texas. The new republic needed to survive militarily before it could exist politically. General Sam Houston commanded the Texan army as it retreated eastward before Santa Anna's advancing forces. In April 1836, Houston turned and attacked the Mexican army at San Jacinto. In a surprise assault lasting only 18 minutes, the Texans defeated Santa Anna's forces and captured the Mexican general himself. The Battle of San Jacinto secured Texas independence. Austin returned to Texas in June 1836 after the revolution had been won. He found a new republic struggling to establish itself. Texas needed leaders, and Austin's experience and reputation made him an obvious choice for high office. In September 1836, Texas held its first election. Sam Houston was elected president of the Republic of Texas. Austin ran for president but lost to Houston. The defeat was disappointing but not surprising. Houston was the military hero who had won independence. Austin was the diplomat and colonizer whose contributions were less dramatic but equally important. Houston appointed Austin as Secretary of State for the new republic. Austin accepted the position and threw himself into the work of building a functioning government. He dealt with foreign relations, worked on treaties with Indian tribes, and helped establish governmental procedures and policies. Austin worked from the temporary capital at Columbia, Texas. He lived in a simple cabin and worked long hours despite declining health. The years of hardship, imprisonment, and stress had taken their toll on Austin's constitution. He suffered from pneumonia and other ailments. Austin never married and had no children. He devoted his entire adult life to the colonization and development of Texas. His personal sacrifices were enormous. He spent his own money to support the colony, often going into debt. He endured years away from any settled home, living on the frontier and traveling on difficult diplomatic missions. On December 27, 1836, just 3 months after Texas independence was secured and only weeks after taking office as Secretary of State, Stephen F. Austin died of pneumonia at the age of 43. He died in Columbia, Texas, in a small cabin, attended by friends but far from any family. Austin's death was mourned throughout Texas. The man who had brought American civilization to Texas and who had navigated the complex path from Mexican colony to independent republic was gone just as the new nation was beginning. Austin died in poverty despite his land holdings because he had invested everything in Texas and received little financial return. At his death, Austin's character and contributions were recognized by those who knew him. He was remembered as a man of integrity, patience, and dedication. Austin was not a fiery orator or a dashing military hero. He was a careful planner, a skilled negotiator, and a persistent advocate who achieved his goals through diplomacy rather than confrontation. The capital of Texas was named Austin in his honor. Counties in Texas and other states bear his name. Stephen F. Austin's legacy is the American settlement of Texas and the foundation of what would become the 28th state of the United States. Austin brought thousands of settlers to Texas, established functioning communities, and created the conditions that made Texas independence possible. Without Austin's colonization efforts, Texas might have remained an empty frontier of Mexico or been settled in a completely different way. Austin's vision was of Texas as a land of opportunity where hard-working people could build prosperous lives. He succeeded in creating that opportunity even though he personally gained little material benefit. Austin's relationship with slavery remains a complicated part of his legacy. He facilitated the expansion of slavery into Texas to attract Southern settlers, even as he privately expressed reservations about the institution. He worked to circumvent Mexican anti-slavery laws, prioritizing the growth of his colony over moral concerns about human bondage. This aspect of Austin's career cannot be ignored or excused, though it must be understood in the context of his time and place. Austin was a man of contradictions. He was a Mexican citizen who led American colonization. He was a peaceful diplomat who became a revolutionary. He was a careful planner who took enormous risks. He was a private man who became a public leader. He sought wealth but died poor. He wanted stability but lived through constant turmoil. Stephen F. Austin's life spanned a transformative period in North American history. He was born shortly after the United States Constitution was ratified and died as Texas was becoming an independent nation that would soon join the United States. Austin participated in the westward expansion that would define 19th-century America. He was an agent of American manifest destiny, though he would not have used that term. Austin saw himself as a colonizer bringing civilization to a wilderness, though that wilderness was home to indigenous peoples and was part of a sovereign nation. The ethical complexities of colonization and expansion are part of Austin's story and must be grappled with in any honest assessment of his life. Austin's diplomatic skills were perhaps his greatest asset. He could negotiate with Mexican officials, manage fractious colonists, deal with Indian leaders, and appeal to American supporters. He spoke multiple languages and understood different cultures and perspectives. Austin was patient when patience was needed and decisive when action was required. He built relationships and trust over years of consistent behavior. These skills allowed him to achieve what more aggressive or confrontational leaders could not have accomplished. Austin's failure to prevent the Texas Revolution might be seen as his greatest defeat. He spent 15 years trying to make the Mexican-Texan relationship work. He believed that accommodation and compromise could satisfy both Mexican sovereignty and Texan aspirations. He was wrong. The cultural, political, and economic differences were too great. The forces pushing toward conflict were stronger than Austin's diplomatic efforts. Yet even in failure, Austin's approach had value. He exhausted peaceful options before resorting to revolution. He gave Mexico every chance to address Texan grievances. When war came, Austin and other Texans could claim they had been forced into it. The Texas that Stephen F. Austin created became a template for American expansion. The impresario system, the mixing of cultures, the tension between local autonomy and central authority, the role of slavery, the displacement of indigenous peoples, all these elements of the Texas story would repeat themselves as America expanded westward. Austin was a pioneer not just geographically but in demonstrating how American settlement would transform the continent. His methods and his challenges foreshadowed what would happen in California, New Mexico, Oregon, and other territories. Stephen F. Austin died too young to see Texas join the United States in 1845 or to witness the Mexican-American War that followed. He did not live to see his colony grow into a great state. But he laid the foundation for all of it. Austin's colonists and their descendants built the ranches, towns, and cities of Texas. They fought in Texas wars and contributed to Texas culture. The old 300 families and those who followed created a society that blended Southern, Mexican, and frontier influences into something distinctively Texan. Today, Stephen F. Austin is remembered as the Father of Texas, a title that captures his essential role in Texas history. Like the title Father of his country for George Washington, it acknowledges that Austin was the indispensable man whose vision, effort, and leadership made possible the creation of a new political entity. Without Washington, there might have been no United States. Without Austin, there might have been no Anglo-American Texas. Both men were reluctant revolutionaries who preferred peaceful development to violent conflict but who accepted revolution when it became necessary. Both men sacrificed personal comfort and wealth for their causes. Both men died revered by those they led. The comparison is not perfect. Washington achieved far more and led a much larger and more significant revolution. But within the context of Texas history, Austin's role was foundational and his contributions were immeasurable. He was the man who made Texas possible, and for that, He deserves to be remembered and honored even as we critically examine the full complexity of his legacy and the consequences of the colonization he led.